Hello and welcome to We Used to Be Journos. It's usually the podcast where two media insiders break down broken news. But today is going to be a slightly different episode. My name is Fran. You probably already know that. My co-host is Antoinette Lattouf. She is not here because she is recovering from major surgery. She's currently on the couch watching Emily in Paris, even though she's supposed to be preparing for our live show. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, boys and girls, it's happening the 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th of February in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Canberra. It's coming up. It's very soon. So if you have not bought your tickets for our live show, I'm going to be including all of the info that you need to know in the show notes and also on our various social media platforms. You can find the link in the bio. Tickets are almost sold, I think. I'm pretty happy with how they're going, so you might have to, put up with a seat at the back, but I would highly encourage you to do that. Also attempting some kind of recovery on a couch somewhere, that's a terrible segue and I apologise, is the Adelaide Writers Festival, which has somewhat imploded, if we can call it that, after the board cancelled the appearance of Palestinian academic Dr. Randa Abdel-Fattah. Randa was supposed to appear at the Adelaide Writers Festival. The statement that the board issued, which I'm sure a lot of you will have been across now, so I'm not going to go into huge detail about it, but basically claimed that it would be culturally insensitive to program Randa so soon after the Bondi massacre. It also included this little doozy of a paragraph. While we do not suggest in any way that Dr. Randa Abdel-Fattah or her writing have any connection to the tragedy at Bondi, which I read that and I thought, yeah, it does sound like you are suggesting that though, just quietly. It was an extraordinary statement and it has, it's an unprecedented move as far as I can remember happening in any writers' festival, really. Also extraordinary is the fact that at the time of recording, there's been around 100 writers/participants that have withdrawn. I was going to say they've withdrawn in solidarity with Randa, but there's been various reasons for their withdrawals. We'll get into that. The chair of the board has resigned. 3 board members have resigned. Festival director Louise Adler has resigned. And Randa herself has issued a legal notice, essentially putting the festival's board on notice that legal proceedings could be coming up in the not too distant future. Of course, hot takes abound. Everybody has an opinion about what has happened and an opinion about the woman at the centre of all of this, Dr. Randa Abdel-Fattah herself. And so today's episode is going to be a chat with Randa. She's agreed very graciously to join us and to talk through all of this, what it's like to be at the centre of it, to talk through the fallout, the media's role in it, and to try and unpack this. We're going to do it together. So, Randa, thank you very much for joining us on We Used to Be Journos.
Thanks for having me, Jan.
I guess I'm going to start by asking it's a fairly redundant question, and anybody that's been listening to our podcast knows that I actually don't really ask it very often. I ask a version of it. I was going to ask, how are you? But instead of asking, how are you, I might ask, what are you out of 10 today?
What does 10 represent? Good?
Yeah, 10 is good. 10 is good. 1 is terrible. 10 is good. Where are you on that spectrum right now?
Right now, wow. If my dad was in the room, he would say, "Yeah, Randa, remember Gaza," and I would have to say 10. I'm okay, Dad. It's 10. That's the measure. Spiritually, that's how I think of things. No matter what we go through here as Palestinians, I am not losing sight of the bigger picture here and that I am part of a bigger movement. And it speaks to our power, actually, when they attack us in this way. And I have to keep remembering that. Of course, it's difficult. It's fatiguing. It's school holidays. I'm a mother as well, but I'm not going to play the pity game here. I'm going to embrace this moment and do this for my people and because it's the right thing to do. But of course, it's hard and exhausting.
I'm so glad that you brought Gaza up so early on in our discussion, because I feel like it's something that in the discussion of all of this has been so lost. And I want to make sure that that's not the case here. So indeed, a very good perspective, I guess, to move forward with. You've issued a legal statement. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that? What is that? What does that entail? And what do you plan to do moving forward here?
Yeah, so I did seek legal advice. As you know, probably this isn't the first. This isn't my first rodeo when it comes to attacks on me, character assassinations, attempts to deplatform me, to get me fired, to have my Australian Research Council grant cancelled. And as you know, taking legal action and our legal sort of avenues, it's never about whether you're in the right. It's about whether you're well-resourced. It's about whether you have the appetite to go through the lawfare that the lobby is going to put you through. But in this instance, I felt quite strongly that, like you said, this was unprecedented. A line had been completely crossed. And so I sought legal advice, and my lawyers are now looking into my options. That's as much as I can say.
Yeah. When you say that a line has been completely crossed, can you elaborate about that for us? I feel like I have an idea of what you're going to say, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been cancelled from festivals before. It happened with Bendigo just a few months ago. I'm very well aware of the way that institutions sort of leverage policy language and diversity, and inclusion and free speech and weaponize it against us, actually, to silence our voices. And they can do that in very blunt ways. They can do it in very clever ways. But in this instance, astonishingly, they didn't even use the veneer of those sorts of usual excuses. The letter that I received in an email on Thursday morning simply used the excuse of cultural sensitivity in the wake of Bondi to deplatform and disinvite me. There was no mention of past statements, which was sort of retrospectively applied in the statement that was published online. And so that for me was actually unprecedented in the blatancy and shamelessness of the anti-Palestinian racism.
I mean, there's a sense of deja vu here because this has happened at the Bendigo Writers Festival in August of last year. For those who don't know, Quick BG, you and others, so it wasn't just you, that's a key difference. You and others were asked to sign a code of conduct and told essentially not to talk about, things that might be controversial or divisive. Everybody kind of read that for what it was, which is please do not talk about Gaza. Authors walked and the festival essentially collapsed. Do you think that the kind of backlash to institutions caving to this outside pressure, does it seem sort of predictable now? Or are we in this, space where the Bondi attack, the Hanukkah event has sort of changed things?
Yeah, I mean, with Bendigo, what's interesting is that actually the code of conduct was issued specifically because of me. So Freedom of Information documents and ABC reporting on this has revealed that actually the code of conduct was shared with everybody as a sort of a cover up, a way to cover up the fact that initially they only wanted to send it to my session. They only wanted to send it to me, the only Palestinian. And somebody tapped them on the shoulder and said, well, that's not really a good idea. And so in an attempt to cover up that blatant sort of targeting of the only Palestinian at that festival, they sent it to everybody. At that time, we were saying, haven't they learned from Antoinette Latouffe's case? I mean, each time this happens, people are citing the case before to say, well, haven't they learned their lesson? And institutions are still not learning their lesson. But what's happened now post-Bondi, I think, is quite clear. It's the sense of entitlement to completely politicize that atrocity, that terrorist event. And I think an overreach. They completely underestimated that the writing community and the public would see through that really despicable attempt to capitalize and opportunistically capitalize on people's grief over what had happened, and to use anti-Semitism as a way to perpetuate anti-Palestinian racism. So I think we are moving now in a different direction. I think it remains to be seen whether other institutions are going to use this as an example of what not to do, or whether they are actually going to be emboldened by this.
I think it was, just to be a stickler, I think it was Deep Cut that broke the story about the Bendigo Festival actually being about you specifically.
Yes, okay. Shout out to Deep Cut, that's true. It's very important.
Independent readers. They listen to this and go, it was us. You didn't say anything.
And and ABC actually pretended that they broke it, but it was Deep Cut.
It was Deep Cut. It did. Yeah. I mean, just back to the kind of unprecedented nature of all of this. Did you expect this many authors to pull out? Did you expect this kind of response?
No, not at all. I knew that, of course, First Nations writers are always the first to show leadership, and they all pulled out without hesitation and in solidarity with me. I didn't expect that kind of a response at all. And you alluded to it in your introduction that not everybody pulled out in solidarity with me. And I think it's an important conversation that we have. But no, there is no way that I expected this many people to do it. But I do think that it is extremely naive that the board could have thought that they wouldn't have done some kind of irreparable harm to the festival. I don't think they could have anticipated that it would go this way.
Mm.
But yeah, it has taken me completely by surprise. It's galvanizing. It's invigorating to see this level of support. It's also heartbreaking to see how institutions like run by these feckless managers are so prepared to decimate and destroy, and all the sort of livelihoods at stake. A festival completely in tatters, and it would be remiss of me not to say, the resignation of Louise Adler, who I have just such enormous respect and love for, and what this has cost her as well.
Mm. Mm. Well, it's interesting that you bring Louise up because she has resigned, and in doing so has written this piece for The Guardian. Now, Louise is a Jewish woman. She's been in the arts. She's a stalwart of the arts. She's been critical of Israel's genocide for a long time. And her article in The Guardian, I just want to read you a few statements of it. I'm sure that you've already read it just to sort of get your thoughts. But she says the new mantra, Bondi changed everything, has offered this lobby, she's talking about the pro-Israel lobby, its stenographers in the media and a spineless political class yet another coercive weapon. Hence, in 2026, the board, in an atmosphere of intense political pressure, has issued an edict that an author is to be cancelled. And she's also written, we need writers now more than ever as our media closes up, as our politicians grow daily more cowed by real power, and as Australia grows more unjust and unequal. I'm curious as to how you have taken in that statement, what your response to it is.
Yeah, I mean, I've known Louise for many years, and she's always been just so passionate and so principled and so ethical and so moral in her stance and in her commitment to platforming all voices, especially marginalized voices. Um, this is very much in line with her principled stance over many years. I feel that what she has done here is really identify what is at stake. And how scary it is for our future here. I mean, the marginalization and suppression and censorship of, minority voices is something that is obvious on a settler colony like Australia, which is structured around white supremacy, and we are always going to be the uncomfortable voices that challenge power. But what we are seeing, as she said, is the politicization of this moment of Bondi, and it's being used now to really carry out the wishes of a lobby so that all kind of silencing now is going to be acceptable. And as I say, and so many of us say, if Palestinians don't get freedom of speech, nobody's going to get it. If Palestinians don't get academic freedom, nobody's going to get it. So they might start with Palestinians now, but rest assured that it's going to come after any group that challenges power and challenges the elites. And we're seeing that happen now. And I think that's why so many people walked from the festival, because they could see that this was a cautionary tale.
I just want to linger on the point of, the point that you made, which is like this is institutions sort of bowing to lobby pressure, and the idea of that cultural sensitivity. Louise herself is Jewish. She's the one that invited you, or at least people
Mm.
the auspices invited you to be part of the festival. I know that the Jewish Council had put out a statement as well, strongly condemning, I think it was in the strongest possible terms, what the board has done. And so you have a Jewish woman essentially, supporting you, the Jewish Council supporting you. And so my question is, what do they mean when they say cultural sensitivities? What does that
Mm.
mean? How do you
Yeah,
reflect
I
on
mean,
that?
it drives me wild, because what we are actually seeing here is how Zionism is the agent of anti-Semitism, how Zionism erases anti-Zionist Jewish identity, their right to speak, their right to claim their Jewish identity. I mean, Louise is the daughter of Holocaust survivors. Her Jewish identity has been completely erased here. She's almost being positioned as an alibi to Palestinians and framed as a threat, therefore, to all Jews. In the statement, there was, a reference to this being a time of mourning. Obviously, I am sitting outside of that group who is mourning what has happened, the implication of that statement. Okay, fine. As a Palestinian, that's the kind of imputation they want to make about me. But what does it say about Louise, the director, the Jewish director of this festival? It implies that she is also not in mourning in inviting a Palestinian writer. I mean, there are so many layers of violence that have been enacted by this decision on Palestinians, on First Nations people, on minority writers, but also on a Jewish woman at the center of it.
Mm. One of the things that I found incredibly frustrating was in the statement, among many things, was the fact that they said that due to your past statements, it would be culturally insensitive to platform you at this time. But they didn't give an indication of what any of your past statements were. And what that has done, it has led to the media, essentially, media and commentariat, however you want to call it, essentially just being given free rein to speculate. So I guess in your opinion, I mean, what role do you think the media, if we can term them as a homogenous entity, which it's not, but I mean, what role do you think it's played in sort of aiding these attacks on individuals and arts institutions?
Yeah, I mean, like the way that mainstream, we call it mainstream imperial media, as Amy Macquarie calls it, have jumped on that bandwagon and sort of trawled up past statements and social media posts without context, without ever allowing for any opportunity for me to explain them. But also, I'm at a point now where I feel, why should I explain them? People who are incensed about certain posts that I made have never ever bothered to show any sort of attention, pay any sort of attention, or show any kind of outrage about a live stream genocide. Why is it that I called for the end of a settler colony? And I remember in one tweet that they are so ropeable about, I was actually quote tweeting 3 Palestinian babies who had frozen to death on Boxing Day, and a Palestinian journalist who was standing outside a hospital as his wife was in labor, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike as he was waiting for his child to be born. That is completely ignored. It's just my quote, that in my tweet, that is the problem, which shows you that they are morally bankrupt. And I refuse to justify or explain myself to people who have no moral compass. I will not answer to them. I will not explain or justify why I said those comments. They should be more outraged by what we are fighting against, a genocide, than the way that I happen to express myself. I won't be tone policed. I won't have the outrage mob deny me my rage and my grief.
Yeah, I find in all of this, it's exactly as you said and exactly what I said at the top of the interview, which is that there is a live stream genocide that we've been watching on our phone for 2 years. And I have found that to be completely absent from the discourse. And of course, as somebody who's sat here and seen just the most unspeakable horrors live streamed on our phone for the last 2 years, for me, that is so front and center of my mind. And to see it just completely erased from any type of kind of discourse, this idea that, oh, well, people are just anti-Semitic. People just don't like the state of Israel. People have said terrible things about X, Y, and Z. It's like that the personification of you were quote tweeting and they just left out that bit and used just the quote of your tweet. It has sort of just been writ large in our media, and that has made me feel like I'm going crazy.
Absolutely. Even now, like in the cycle of this kind of moment of crisis and controversy, where I'm having to, respond to these sorts of allegations about anti-Semitic attacks, and I'm reading all the garbage that's being printed by those justifying my, cancellation, calling me an anti-Semite and hateful. At the same time that I am sharing content about Israel bombing Lebanon, at the same time as Israel is breaching the so-called ceasefire to kill 5 Palestinian children, at the same time that we are seeing Palestinians remain slaughtered and besieged and drowning in tents and freezing to death. A 1-week-old baby froze to death 2 days ago. And I'm sitting there reading material about me being hateful. And so it's this, like, it feels dystopian. It feels like every teenage novel that you read about the world going inside out. I feel like I'm going crazy. The insanity of this moment. And that speaks to you about the power of their propaganda, that they can even reframe this entire controversy so that it's about me, my morality and my ethics and my conduct, and not their hate and the state that they are justifying and defending.
You mentioned at the top, I think we were chatting and you said that, this is not your first rodeo, so to speak.
Yeah.
This is something that you've kind of been fighting for the last 2 years. Can you talk us through some of the things that you have been fighting for the last 2 years? The one that pops to my mind is obviously your Australian Research Council grant with Macquarie University.
Yeah, so actually it all really started to escalate in March 2024 because of the cancellation of other artists from the State Library of Victoria. on the grounds of cultural safety and sensitivity and child safety. I mean, again, they just throw these massive accusations that speak to people's character, that are so defamatory that they just throw these words around. And so I posted in relation to that, this way that safety and feelings are weaponized. People are not distinguishing between feelings and facts on the ground, for goodness sake. And so that led to a massive coordinated campaign by Murdoch media, pro-Israel lobby groups, and the coalition. And it started from there. We need her ARC grant to be cancelled. She needs to be fired. And so that just continued. And it's a very well-oiled machine. And then when I spoke at an anti-racism symposium organized and led by the Karamba Institute, a First Nations-led institute in Mianjin, and I was speaking about decolonizing knowledge. So as an academic in universities, how do I try to bridge the gap between the ivory tower of academia and grassroots communities? I don't want to be that academic who sits and writes papers that 5 people read. I want to be an academic who produces knowledge that actually means something, contributes to the world, speaks with my community, not to them. And in that, I was talking about bending the rules of knowledge production, bending the rules and conventions. Well, that was just enough for Murdoch media and their cronies to spin it as somehow a confession. I mean, if I was doing that, would I be so stupid to say that out loud? That I was bending the funding rules, which led to a 10-month, really, really detailed investigation. And I'm glad it was, in which I was completely vindicated. And it's still not enough. I think they're so pissed off that I came out of that and have retained my fellowship. And I just hope people can see through this, because they expose themselves time and time again. They want our necks, and the more we refuse, the harder they come at us.
What do you think it is about you in particular? Because it seems that everywhere you go, there is some kind of concerted effort, whether it is successful or not, whether it is a minor thing or a major thing, there is some kind of concerted effort to have you removed from whatever bill you end up on. Do you think there is something particular about you, or do you think this happens to everybody? And if it is particular about you, what do you think it is?
Look, I think when you look at the way the Hasbara machine works and the way the lobbying works, not just here in Australia, but in the US and the UK, there's the cautionary tale. So they'll pick off the public figures as a warning shot to those who might not have the social media platform or the public profile to be able to weather the storm and to be able to gather, to be able to really have the community support behind them because they have a low profile. And so it's like a warning shot. If you take those down, then the message will be clear to others. Keep quiet, or this will happen to you. It was happening to me before October. My Q&A appearances, there were always complaints and coordinated attacks. My understanding of why it has changed is because prior to October 7, we haven't changed our critique of Israel. We have always known it has been a violent settler colony that is killing Palestinians, stealing their land, committing apartheid. We've always said that. This year will be 78 years. After October 7, the fact that this was now live streamed and the fact that a global movement of solidarity emerged meant Israel could no longer deny it. Israel could no longer just debate this in polite society. The evidence of our eyes was telling us what was happening. And so the only option they have is silence. Just crush all voices, because we can't fight what people can see with their eyes. So we're going to shut their voices down. And as you can probably tell, like you and Antoinette, I don't shut up. And so this is probably the reason why they're coming after me.
I know you said you don't really want to explain yourself to people, but I wouldn't mind kind of just unpacking this, because one of the things that again, it wasn't in the statement, it was just media speculation, but I think a lot of people will have seen it and will have read this, is that, the main gripe that people seem to have with you is this idea where you said that Zionists should not be entitled to cultural safety. So two things. Yeah. Can you give us the context that was in? Because clearly it's a statement that has been pulled from somewhere.
Yeah.
And two, what did you actually mean by that?
I have no problem talking about this with you, because it's not an interrogation by somebody who hasn't had a moral compass for the last 2 years. So that I'm happy, I welcome the opportunity to explain it. Again, it was in the context of in March 2024, the State Library cancelled a group of poets and authors, including Omar Sakr. And the reason they cited was that it would be a threat to cultural safety and child safety and sensitivities. And so I subtweeted about that. Oh, sorry, rewind. Also, the popular Adelaide Festival, which is very uncanny that we're talking about it now, disinvited a Palestinian DJ band. And again, citing reasons of cultural safety. And so my tweet was about this, was in direct response to that. There is a distinction. First of all, I'll rewind. Cultural safety does not mean physical safety. Cultural safety is not something that is afforded to political ideologies. It's something afforded to racial and ethnic minorities. It actually comes from Maori Indigenous health literature, and it's about creating safe environments for historically racially marginalized peoples. So it is something that applies to racial minorities. It is not something that can be used by a settler colonial ideology to claim safety to. It is about as ridiculous as saying that a communist Chinese person can claim the right to cultural safety when you critique communism. Chinese people have a right to cultural safety. Communist is a political ideology that can be critiqued. Jews have a right to cultural safety. Zionism is a political ideology that can be critiqued. In fact, my social media post followed up with a clarification for those people who refuse to understand that distinction between Zionist and Jew, to say, if you think this was an attack on Jews and Judaism, then that is your anti-Semitism, not mine. I made that clarification, and I always and continue to do so. Zionism is a political ideology. And just as we say that white supremacy, communism, Marxism are all entitled to be critiqued, so too is Zionism.
And what does that term like cultural safety mean when something is not entitled to cultural safety as an ideology? What does that actually look like in cultural spaces?
Yeah, so I actually spell it out. It means you do not have the right to claim cultural safety to espouse your ideology. So in practical terms, if I'm in a space and somebody starts defending the right to ethnically cleanse and the right to racially segregate and the right to steal land and the right to commit a genocide, should we afford them the safety to do so in polite society and say, yeah, you totally have the right to say that? I'm not going to be violent towards them. I'm not going to physically restrain them or kick them out. What I'm saying is that kind of justification should be condemned and critiqued. It should not be platformed and celebrated in the name of free speech. It is about as ridiculous as saying that a white supremacist is entitled to take to a stage and defend the right to subjugate Black populations, or a misogynist can take to the stage and talk about the inferiority of women. Zionism is a political ideology that stands for settler colonialism and, racial segregation. And so this is exactly the point I was making. I understand now that there was a lot of confusion about cultural safety, and that was my naivety then. That's the only point I'm willing to concede, that social media was not the best place to articulate that, and it should have been spelt out. But of course, Palestinians who are grieving and witnessing the genocide of their people are never afforded that kind of benefit of the doubt. We must always attach academic references and footnotes to our public, pronouncements.
I mean, I think social media is probably not a platform to discuss anything of note.
Yeah.
And yet, in many instances, it is the only platform available to us. And so there is this constant push-pull. I completely understand that. And
I would have loved to do an op-ed about it. We're not allowed to do op-eds in any mainstream media. So we are left to the devices of an X post or Instagram post created on Canva.
I mean, speaking of, this is again a terrible segue, but in terms of, expressing oneself, this has happened very recently. The cartoonist Cathy Wilcox has had a cartoon of hers cancelled, as in pulled. It was published by the SMH, and they have then since issued an apology saying that, we're sorry we caused offence. For those that haven't seen it, I'll just try and describe it. It was sort of a depiction of, sports stars, ex-politicians, members of the legal faculty, Benjamin Netanyahu, whoever it is, essentially pushing for a royal commission or sort of being underneath the people that are pushing for a royal commission. And within that, you're mentioned. So I just want to give you a read of that section. As Royal Commissioner Virginia Bell begins her inquiry, we will have more uncomfortable conversations about what constitutes free speech. The seeds of that debate have been sown in the past week with the withdrawal of a host of eminent writers from the Adelaide Writers Week, following the removal of controversial Palestinian writer Randa Abdel-Fattah from the program. Your thoughts on being described as a controversial writer, not an eminent writer, though you've won, I don't know how many awards. I've got 11. There's possibly more, been published in over 15 countries. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, my sister's really funny. She's been like keeping track of all the adjectives used to describe me.
Tell me, what are they?
Like controversial, right, anti-Semite. The latest is jihadist chic. It's like, what can I say?
I haven't heard that one. That's a new one.
Yeah. What can I say? Again, people will see through that. It's like just blatant character assassinations. Controversial by whose standards? Wow, it's controversial to fight genocide.
This is a very sort of vague and nebulous question, but I'm sure there's a better way to kind of ask it, and I don't know what it is because I'm at odds with it myself. Like, what is now the best way to proceed from here? Because I think that there would be so many of our Ederati listening to this thinking, what do I do? I'm confused, I'm outraged, I'm shocked, I'm having like this, confluence of feelings, and I feel above all maybe helpless and despairing, which is a difficult place to be. So what do you do?
Okay, the first practical step. Yeah, I think the first practical steps when we've witnessed the decimation of a writers' festival is to really show solidarity when it comes to writers. I'm not talking about the big writers here, the big best-selling. They'll be okay. They'll be fine. I'm talking about the minority writers who, rely on these festivals to get their books out, who rely on those book sales, borrow their books from the library if you can't afford to buy their books, support them in that way, because this has been a massive loss of opportunity for them. And so I think that at least we can support them through those kinds of practical acts of solidarity. And my mum's been going around to bookstores and calling them and platforming, like telling them, have you ordered Chelsea Watergo's book, Amy Macquarie's book, Michaela Sahara's book, and just giving them lists of books to order and then buying them. These are the practical steps. That's how you show community care. Like in these moments of absolute despair and rage, and when you feel the force of the elites coming together, organizing themselves, and like the sort of the forces of power feel so impenetrable, we sometimes forget the power of community, and it's small acts of care that make such a difference. And I think that would be a beautiful act. And then more broadly is not to lose the sight of what's at stake here. I know that this sort of moment can be hijacked as a question about like liberal ideas of free speech only, but that can be a very dangerous slippery slope because not all speech is equal. I think that we should not lose sight of what's at stake here, and that is that there is a genocide that is being undertaken, and they are trying to silence us. They're trying to silence our voices about that. They're trying to say that objecting to condemning the killing of children, that deliberate starvation is wrong, that bombing refugee camps is wrong, that is anti-Semitic. So we need to collectively fight with all that we have to shut that down, to push back. And that is the biggest honor that you can do in the wake of Bondi. There's a way that we can flip the script because they're using that tragedy to further violence, to perpetuate violence, to cause division, to cause hate. But we can refuse that and reject that. And we can say, actually, we insist on a different kind of world here. We're not stupid. We're not going to allow you to politicize and weaponize our grief. We're actually going to use it and channel it into creating a world that we imagine that we all deserve. And I think that I am an idealist, I'm not a Pollyanna kind of optimist. I understand what we're up against, but every single day you have to carry out the kind of values that you want to see in a future world. You don't just wait for it to happen. It has to happen every day. I'm a firm believer in that. And so, like you asked me in the beginning, how do I feel? I feel exhausted, but I'm also galvanized by this moment because we showed the power of the collective. I think it's one of the few times that we've ever really shown The March for Humanity across the Harbour Bridge is one of them. But this is a moment that's unprecedented. To collapse a festival in like 3 or 4 days and to show that community outrage over power, I think, come on. I mean, this is exciting. This is a sign of what we have, that kind of power. I can't imagine any of those lobbyists, getting a decent human being to sign a letter of solidarity on their behalf. So many decent people have come out at their own cost and at material cost to stand in solidarity. That's beautiful.
Well, I think that might be the right note to end this chat on. Randa, thanks so much for your time. And
Thank you,
I
Jen.
guess we'll be waiting to see how the next few days, weeks, months unfold.
Thank you. Thanks for keeping up this podcast. It's bloody brilliant. It's great work.
Thank you.
We need it.
We appreciate every interview guest that ends interviews that way. So tick of approval for you. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for tuning in to yet another episode of We Used to Be Journos. Next week, I believe that we will be back with regular programming, aka my co-host and I, who will be off the couch, whose stitches will be out, hopefully. So make sure you tune on in there for a regular episode of We Used to Be Journos. The first of the year will be next week. And if you haven't bought tickets to our live show, go and do it! And we will see you all either in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Canberra. All the information in the show notes. Thank you very much. See you then.